Hey, have you heard about my AI alter ego? That's right. Ask Alan Anything is now live, and we've trained it on my 13 books. We've trained it on over 200 podcasts. It has most of what's in here, not everything, but most of what's in here. And you can, when you're sitting around going, gee, I wonder what Alan would do in this situation, or I wonder what Alan would say in this situation. Well, now you can. Go to whatwouldallansay.com. Enter the coupon code podcast because you're going to get half off. It starts at only $10 a month. And now when you're thinking, I wonder what Alan say, now you can actually ask. Go to whatwouldallansay.com, enter the coupon code podcast, and start asking me anything. Are your weddings and your business accessible the way you think? Listen to this episode and find out. Welcome to another episode of the Wedding Business Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Berg. I'm a speaker, sales trainer, consultant, author, and I help businesses like yours sell more, profit more, and have a little more fun doing it. Enjoy this episode. Hi, it's Alan Berg. Welcome back to another episode of the Wedding Business Solutions Podcast. I am so happy to have a new friend on. Rosemarie Rossetti is a Ph.D. and an expert on accessibility. And actually, I'm going to let her tell you that. So we met at the National Speakers Association conference, and we started talking, and she had just written an article for weddings about accessible weddings. And I said, we need to talk about this. So Rosemarie, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for the invitation. What a coincidence that we happened to meet just a few weeks ago.
This is opportunity, right? Opportunity is you're talking to someone, you never know where it's going to go. I can remember. Just to tell people, you've been in a wheelchair for 25 years, right? Right.
A little
And
more than that,
a little more
actually.
than that
Yeah.
now. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was from an accident.
Yes, this was in June of '98 while riding my bicycle. Suddenly, a 80-foot tall tree collapsed on me and paralyzed me from the waist down. So it was just a freaky kind of thing. There was no rain, no storm, no threat of anything. My husband and I were celebrating our third wedding anniversary. He thought it was a gunshot, and he saw it halfway down and tried to warn me, but there was nothing that I could do. 7,000 pounds on top of me with live power lines.
I think about some other speakers that we know, like Chad Hymas, against just accidents like that. My friend Charlie in New Jersey, who I also met at NSA. I was going in to get lunch, and I turned around, as I always do, to hold the door, and there's Charlie in his wheelchair, and I held the door, and then we went and had lunch together, found out we both live in New Jersey, and became friends. And you and I met in the hallway of an NSA meeting, and here we go, and now we get to start our friendship. So you have recently written an article. Tell us about that.
Well, I wasn't the writer.
Right.
Chappelle Johnson was the writer from The Knot. I was just interviewed, fortunately, to contribute my thoughts as an accessibility consultant. I travel all over the U.S. working with meeting professionals. I work with convention centers, restaurants, hotels. And so when I was contacted about the wedding venue, I was just full of ideas. I've been to a lot of weddings in my wheelchair, being a sense of belonging and helping people throughout my career to make a difference so that people, no matter in what venue they are, that's what I look at, the specialty of venues. And of course, weddings occur in all sorts of locations, inside, outside. So it's my privilege and pleasure to make a difference so that no one has a blind spot or they say, I just didn't know, I wasn't aware. Thank you for bringing this to my attention as I work with the planning committee in advance.
Yeah, I mentioned to you that I spoke at the Inclusive Wedding Summit beginning of the year. Brian Lawrence put on with Brenda Ferrani. Oh, I'm sorry, Brenda, I just messed up your name. And we wanted people to know inclusivity was not just LGBTQAI plus. Inclusivity is also for physical disabilities. It's also for body type and culture and all these different things. Um, and one of the things you mentioned the word blind spot. I spoke a lot about that because those of us that are not physically challenged, we wouldn't notice when there is a doorway that you couldn't go into because it's too wide, because it's not wide enough, because there's a sill that's not right. You mentioned a bathroom. You told me there was a bathroom that said it was handicapped accessible. What was it? The door that went the wrong way?
The door goes on the inside, blocking the access for me. And then once I tried to get in and open the door, it there was a wall there, so you really couldn't get in. I don't know why they thought it was accessible, but I brought the general manager of the hotel immediately. And I said, "Take a look at me trying to get in here. I can't even get in. Why
Right.
would you put accessible on here?"
Yeah, because somebody looked at a piece of paper and it said the doorway needs to be this wide and whatever, check mark, check mark, check mark, but never really tried it. I remember I was in California at a venue and I was doing sales training, and a couple happened to come in for a tour. And it was a very rustic thing up in the mountains, beautiful, but clearly not accessible. I mean, these were like log steps going down. But I know that they had handicap parking and elevator ramps, all those things. You just couldn't see it where we were walking. And I said to the couple, "Do you have any guests that have mobility issues?" I brought that up to them in a question. I'm not assuming they do, but let's face it, if you're inviting 150, 200 people, there's a good chance, right? There's somebody with a cane or a chair or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I asked them and they said, no, we don't think so. I said, well, if you find out that you do, we're fully handicapped accessible, handicap parking, elevator ramps, everyone will enjoy every minute of your wedding.
Sure.
Letting them know that should it come up that, let's face it, it doesn't have to be someone, had something like yours. It could be somebody that, broke a leg skiing and all of a sudden, they're on crutches or something. So I think there's three parts to this. One is the weddings, which we're talking about, making those accessible. But we also have association meetings. We have the wedding industry coming together, and those need to be accessible. And then you also have your businesses, the people that are listening here, your businesses. And you mentioned you worked in you're a horticulturist. You worked in a flower shop,
Yes, I did. I worked
right?
at a garden center. I worked in a flower shop. So I'm very familiar. I was not in a wheelchair at that time. That was
Okay,
before my injury. But as I think back in terms of could they get into the flower shop, what were the aisles like? What would be an obstacle for something in terms of something on the floor that someone would run into and get hurt, as well as if there's a table that the family is going to sit down and look at some samples of photos. How high is that table or that counter so that someone who is short statured or in a wheelchair would be able to participate and see what is in that portfolio?
right. You mentioned again employees, not just customers. When I worked at the Knot in their office in New York City, there was someone of short stature, and there was a little step stool, and so Steve could get to all the files. Steve could get to anything he needed to, and that was made for him. And Steve was just another employee who could do everything he needed to do because the accommodation was made. So when you're thinking of hiring employees, like for your flower shop, can they get into the cooler to get to the flowers? Can they get to all the things? So what are you seeing? Let's start with the weddings themselves. Someone is a wedding venue who's listening in here. They're a wedding venue. What kind of accommodations? What are the things that they should look for, and what could they do if they wanted to get, professional help so that you don't run into what you did with the bathroom, which is checking a box. That doorway is wide enough, but no, you can't use it. What are the tools that they could use?
Well, they need to do a site visit, of course, with the family and understand who is coming. And Alan, it's not always that a person has a disability and the family knows it in advance. There's accidents that happen the week before, or a surgery that was important, and now this person is now using crutches, or they just broke their toe yesterday, and
Right,
so they're temporarily in a little scooter. So things happen temporarily.
right.
Sometimes they happen at the wedding even. And so,
Shh, we don't like to talk about that.
you have to have a plan B and
Right.
always think in terms of the whole experience. If they're arriving by car or they're going to be dropped off by a ride share, that's the first impression in terms of how they're going to get to the venue. How easy is it to park? Are there enough accessible parking spaces, especially the van accessible? ADA has a lot of documents. If you just go to ada.gov or you look up accessible parking, they have a whole chart indicating how many of the spaces should be marked as accessible parking versus the number of total parking places. So
Okay.
thinking in terms of where they're located also, they should be close to the entrance, not in the back. They should
Right.
be on flat surfaces, not on a slant, so that when I come out of my van, I'm going really fast, like the luge in the Winter Olympics. You know,
And this is again, this is the blind spot because, you know, some of us would look and see, okay, the handicap parking is close to the front door, not realizing, yes, you know, you're going to roll out of your van and want to be able to stop, right? So this is again our where you need someone who, whether or not they're in a chair themselves, understands those things. And what are the liabilities then? What are the liabilities if someone, because I know some of the venues that are listening might be historic buildings, you know, on the National Register, and you have rules about what you can and can't do in terms of modifications. How does that affect accessibility?
well, I was in London not too long ago, and I went to St. Paul's Cathedral, which is 300 years old, a
Oh, it's
pretty
beautiful.
historic building.
It's
And
beautiful.
I thought, how am I ever going to get into that cathedral with all those steps?
Hmm.
Don't you know, they thought ahead. They had integrated beautiful ramp. It was just absolutely gorgeous with the same stone that they had used
Mm.
throughout the entire cathedral. So don't give me the example of a historic building not being able to be renovated. A lot of
Right.
times they'll look at a lower window and then they'll start investigating how can that lower window be architecturally designed as a new entrance with an elevator or a lift system.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of architects that specialize in historic building modifications. And it doesn't always have to be the front door like the cathedral in London. It was a
Right.
side entrance, which helps everybody that's paying admission to go see the cathedral, all the volunteers, all the clergy, everyone was benefiting. So there's a lot of people that didn't want to go up all those steps. So they
Right.
had this
Right.
very nice curved ramp that you could just walk up or roll up. And it was lit at night also, and it had handrails. It's beautiful.
I would also be appreciated by your DJs and other people rolling their equipment in and having a nice, gentle ramp to get up to get their things in there as well. Uh, so, if someone is in a building that it's historic and on the register that they can't do certain things, this override, I would think this should override that, right? Making it accessible should override not being able to make
Well,
modifications
if
to a
they can
historic building.
afford to make the changes, they should be making these
Okay.
changes. It's a business imperative. Why
Right.
would they not? With the population, it's getting older, especially.
Right.
And so
Right.
when you look at 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 people, depending what country you're in, has a disability. They're not always mobility related. There's all kinds of hidden disabilities in terms of not apparent disabilities, too. So it's a business imperative. Why not? That gives you more diversity in your workforce and your volunteers, as well as the customers or the visitors. More attendance, more participation, a better view for belonging.
And what about the maybe I'm going to say maybe unconscious, maybe conscious bias where someone sees you in a wheelchair and thinks you don't have other abilities like that you couldn't arrange flowers or you couldn't, you know, make alterations on a dress or whatever it is. I'm sure. Have you experienced that yourself?
No.
Okay, but
Fortunately,
you heard about it.
my resume and
Uh,
experience on credentials and recommendations and client list is
mhm.
proof of concept.
Right. For
So
yourself, I'm talking about other people who are looking to hire, you know,
sure,
and they would see someone in a wheelchair and say, oh, well, maybe they can't do the job, but it might require some, some, you know, accommodation.
it might, and
Right.
there's money for that. There's
Right. Okay.
tax advantages also. There's grants, there's funds, there's organizations that will help a business, especially a small business that says, "Wow, I've got a new employee, but there's no restroom for them. I'm going to have to modify our restroom, and that's going to be costly." And so, can they do something and then take the advantage from their tax? They can talk to their tax accountant and understand that it's not that difficult.
And then you mentioned grants as well. Who would those grants be from?
Well, it could be a small business administration, it could be your local county, it could be your city.
Okay.
Go to your local library and start searching for building modification grants for accessibility.
Right. Or go to AI these days and search for that
Yeah,
because it knows everything, right? It'll find those things
sure.
there. So, thinking about our industry conferences, if you're looking to plan a conference, they should be asking those questions, right? You planning the conference should be asking about that facility. Like you said, it's not whether you know today whether or not someone has a mobility issue. It could happen the day before the conference, or again, hopefully not at the conference, but the day before the conference. Although we should talk to who was it, Pat Dwyer, who fell off the stage at a conference, and there were some. Oh, it was Tim Gard also. Tim Gard got too close to the front of the stage, fell off, is lying flat on his back, and he had such a good comic mind. He says to his in his microphone, I'll now take some questions from the floor," as he's lying on his back in front of this stage there. So, what are the kind of questions that someone would ask? You're planning a meeting, you're going to a venue. What should they be asking?
In terms of the meeting planners,
So you're let's say you're planning a meeting for your group, your association, right? You're a chapter of a national group. You're going to go to a venue. What should they be asking?
well, they need to know who else is going there, of course, in terms of the attendees.
Well, they'll know sort of that, but if they're what should they be asking the venue that they're thinking of having this at?
Well,
So
they
what?
should look at the venue's website. That's the
Okay,
first thing.
okay,
And see if there's an accessibility section there.
okay,
That's the first clue. And are there pictures? And to what extent they have fully disclosed the accessibility services and all of the things that are available to them. They can also go to the city's website. Like I live in Columbus, Ohio, so you go to Experience Columbus, look at their accessibility landing page and the things that they have to support accessible destinations and accessible venues, accessible hotels. So
mm,
that's a first step. I would look online to see
okay,
how much a priority accessibility was for that venue. And then we just start, there's lots of checklists out there. Not, they're not a few of them. I mean, you'll be overwhelmed. They're all over
mm,
the world. There's checklist after checklist. So just start searching for accessible checklist, venue checklist, accessibility checklist, and just follow along. Or hire an accessibility consultant like me
right,
to
right.
work with them.
So if you're a venue that's listening, I don't know that I've ever seen an accessibility page on a wedding venue's website. Now, truth be told, I wasn't looking for one, but I do look through and I do consult on websites. I don't remember ever seeing one. I my site is accessible. I have had people talking about that. So if you don't know what that is, look in the bottom left corner of a website. You'll see what looks like the Vitruvian man, standing with their arms out, a little icon showing you that that site is accessible for people with visual impairments, ADHD, seizures, and so forth. But an accessibility page. So if a venue is listening, what should they put on that page? You said pictures, so I guess that would be parking, ramps, elevators, things like that. Bathrooms, right?
Oh, sure. And
Okay.
maybe
What
an
else?
adult changing table. For example, I was married here in Columbus at the Franklin Park Conservatory and Botanical Gardens.
Okay.
And it's 100-year-old palm house that I was married in. It was
Beautiful.
before my injury, of course, but now as I go there as a visitor in my wheelchair to go around and see the new elevator that was put into the Palm House, the adult changing table, which many people aren't familiar with.
Yeah.
You may have guests that have an adult that needs to have their clothes changed. And so they don't fit on the baby changing table. So we need to have the adult changing table somewhere in a restroom. And I was so proud to see Franklin Park Conservatory has one. It's in the family changing room. And, you're bringing your children in strollers. Some of your children are in wheelchairs and they're big. these are children or 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds that still have a need for clothing to be changed.
Mm.
So it's adjustable in height with remote controls. Some of them have ceiling hoist systems so that you can use a sling to help get that person out of the wheelchair and onto the table in dignity. So
Wow.
those are some new things out there that I've been an advocate for, especially at convention centers.
Mm.
When I ask them, "Where is your adult changing table?" Last Saturday, I went to the Ohio State Fair, and they've got one. So I'm like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys are on top of things."
So with I don't go into family changing rooms because I don't have small children. I don't have an adult who needs that. Would that be pretty common now in new construction where you see the family
I'm
bathrooms?
not able to comment on new
Okay.
construction. I
Okay.
look at existing, and
Okay.
so that's what I see. I, I think it's just underlooked.
Mm.
People think that the baby changing table is all you need. It's
Right.
just an oversight as people are living longer with a disability and parents are keeping them at home and they are getting out in the community. They're going to special education schools and programs and participating. So in the past, they would have to put them on the floor of a
Mm.
restroom to change their clothes.
Right.
That's not sanitary. That's
No.
not private. That's
Right.
not right.
There's no dignity in that. Absolutely.
No.
And again, this is one of those blind spots. If you don't have a relative or you're not living with someone who has that need, this is the first time I've heard the phrase "adult changing table." Never heard it,
Mhm.
never heard it before. Again, so thank you for shining a light on another blind spot because we can't do anything about something we don't know. We don't know there. So, weddings accessible. If you're a wedding vendor going to do a wedding at somewhere and you have whatever your mobility issues might be, I would think a site visit ahead of time, if possible, would be good. So you're not finding out on the day what's
Yeah.
going on. That would be nice. Um, and then again, as a caterer, as a venue, as anyone that is bringing people into their building, bridal shops. I don't know if that was part of your interview with the Not for that article, but accommodating the brides who might be in a
Sure.
wheelchair.
I am an advocate of grab bars, wider doors, benches. So many times I go shopping and I have selected some slacks, some pants, some shorts, and I go in the dressing room and there's no grab bar. And I'm like, how in the heck am I supposed to do this?
Right,
It's not easy when there's no bar to hold on to.
right,
Sometimes I just take the garments, hand them back to the sales clerk, and say, "You are not in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. You need to change this. I have told your manager time and time again. It still hasn't been fixed. Please get this fixed. I cannot buy this merchandise. Thank you very much. I'm leaving."
right. So Americans with Disabilities Act, again, venues, you should be making sure you're in compliance. Your physical property, your website, we should all be doing that regardless of the size of our business. Our website should be fully compliant so that people with, again, visual impairments, hearing impairments, seizures, ADHD, go down the line, all the things that, if you go to my website, alanberg.com, bottom left corner, click on the little person, it'll give you all the different options there on how to make that site more accessible for people with different abilities there. Okay, so this is really interesting. I'm so glad we ran into one another because I love getting the light shined on my blind spots because we all have them and we don't know that they're blind spots until the light gets shined on them. Then we find that out. But I was thinking not just about weddings, but also about there we were at a conference, you and I together, and you have to be able to do everything we did, right? That's the point. But then also I started thinking, wait a minute, what if I was the one throwing that meeting? I want to make sure it's accessible for you as well. So thank you for uh, thank you for coming to the NSA conference so we could meet. Thank you for being interviewed for that article right when we spoke so that it was fresh in your mind. Wait a minute, weddings, we need to talk about this. And we will have in the show notes how to find out more about you, how to connect with you, if anybody has any questions there. But again, you have some resources in your counties, your state, Federal Americans with Disabilities Act, if you go look that up. And, let's just make our businesses and our weddings accessible to everyone.
Absolutely. I can't wait to be invited.
Me too. I don't go to enough weddings, having been in this industry for over 30 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
Thanks, Alan.
Hi, it's Alan Berg. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Wedding Business Solutions podcast. If you have a suggestion for a future topic or a guest, please go to podcast.alanberg.com and you can make your suggestion there. You can also do it at Ask Me Anything, which is a button on that page, or just email me at alan@weddingbusinesssolutions.com. And if you'd like to find out how I can help you with sales training, website review, consulting, or speaking for your group or organization, possibly at no cost to the organization, contact me directly, alan@weddingbusinesssolutions.com. Thanks again for tuning in.